Welcome back to Act for Missouri's Freedom Pulse. This is the second episode in our special series on Amendment 3. In the first episode, we talked about why this fight matters so much and why the stakes are so high for Missouri. In this episode, we're going to take a closer look at the new Amendment 3, House Joint Resolution 73, provision by provision. We're not here to tell anyone how to vote, but because this proposal would change our Constitution, we believe it deserves careful examination. Everyone should know exactly what they're voting for, not just rely on talking points or promises. That's why we're going to slow down and walk through the actual language of HJR 73, section by section, so you can judge for yourself what it really does. Section 1 of HJR 73 says this: the state's duty to protect public health and welfare includes protecting the integrity and ethics of the medical profession. The state's interest in regulating the practice of medicine is even greater in areas of medical and scientific uncertainty or in areas that raise grave moral and ethical concerns, including abortion and gender transition procedures. At first glance, that sounds reasonable, but let's look closer. Notice the word choice. Abortion is described as an area of medical and scientific uncertainty. In plain English, that means they're treating abortion as something doctors and scientists don't fully agree on, like a medical debate. And because of that, they say it should be regulated. But here's the problem. Abortion is not an uncertain medical question. We know exactly what it does. It ends the life of a child. By calling it an area of uncertainty, this amendment shifts abortion out of the category of right and wrong and into the category of healthcare policy. That's the wrong foundation. God never told the government to regulate murder. Romans 13 says government is meant to punish evil and protect the innocent. But this section makes abortion look like a healthcare debate instead of a justice issue. It also lumps abortion together with gender transition procedures. Now, we absolutely need to deal with the transgender issue, but this may not be the best way to do it. Missouri already passed the SAFE Act, which bans these procedures for minors, and that law is in place for at least 2 more years. So this issue can and should be addressed on its own, in a firm and legally solid way, not bundled together with abortion. And while a judge recently allowed both subjects to be combined under the single subject rule, that decision will almost certainly be appealed. Who knows what a future judge will rule? By tying abortion and gender transition together in the Constitution, we create unnecessary risk that the whole thing could be struck down, or worse, that one part is thrown out while the abortion exceptions remain. So right from the very beginning, Section 1 puts us on the wrong foundation. Instead of declaring that life must be protected, it declares that abortion should be regulated, like it's a medical service to make safer, not an injustice to end. Before we move on to Section 2, there's something we need to clear up. One of the biggest arguments we hear in favor of HJR 73 is that the exceptions for rape, incest, anomaly, and medical emergency are already in the Constitution because of Amendment 3 in 2024. But that's simply not true. Here's the actual language. Section A. Section 36, Article 1, Constitution of Missouri, is repealed and one new section adopted in lieu thereof. That means the 2024 amendment is completely thrown out and replaced with brand new language. If this amendment stopped right there, Missouri would be better off. But it doesn't stop there. It goes on to explicitly write abortion exceptions into our Constitution for the very first time. So let's be clear. A yes vote on HJR 73 doesn't just repeal Amendment 3 of 2024. A yes vote is saying you are okay with putting abortion exceptions for rape, incest, anomaly, and medical emergency into our Constitution, permanently. Now let's look at Section 2. Here's what it says. An abortion may be performed or induced upon a woman in cases of medical emergency, fetal anomaly, rape, or incest. In the case of abortions performed or induced in cases of rape or incest, the abortion may be performed or induced no later than 12 weeks gestational age of the unborn child. This is where the exceptions are written directly into the Constitution. And remember what we said earlier. A yes vote means you are affirming this language and putting these exceptions into Missouri's highest law. Some people will argue these exceptions are a necessary evil, that in order to save some babies, we have to sacrifice others. But a necessary evil is still evil. Once these exceptions are written into the Constitution, every unborn child who falls under one of these categories is denied equal protection. We are saying some children deserve to live and others do not. And Scripture is clear. God hates partiality and unequal weights and measures. He doesn't call us to compromise with injustice. He calls us to defend all life. There are also practical problems. Rape and incest. There are no safeguards here. No police report required. No investigation required. No penalty for false claims. Anyone could simply say they were raped and immediately qualify for an abortion. That means this isn't a narrow exception. It's essentially abortion on demand for the first 12 weeks. And instead of bringing abusers to justice, this language could actually cover up crimes. Fetal anomaly. We know diagnoses are often wrong. Many parents have been told their baby wouldn't survive or that the pregnancy was too risky, only to later give birth to a healthy child. One mother in Paulsbo, Washington, was told just that, and I want you to hear her story in her own words.
1, 2, 3!
Garrett Brown, who goes by G, is 3.5, a superhero of sorts. He survived the unthinkable.
Every doctor that I've talked to of G's is like, what are you talking about? This doesn't happen. That's not a thing. And it's very much a thing.
After a positive pregnancy test, Laura Brown went to her doctor at Kitsap OBGYN in Silverdale. She'd had some cramping and bleeding, so they did an ultrasound.
On the ultrasound, it was literally a blob, a misshapen blob.
There was concern it wasn't attached and could leave the uterus and become an ectopic pregnancy.
The way that she explained it is it could essentially go up into my tubes and attach there and cause problems. If the egg grows from there, then it can burst inside. The doctor, she said, there is no chance that this is viable, and we do need you to come in this afternoon and take the methotrexate. And I said, are you sure? Because, we didn't want to do anything we shouldn't be doing. And they said, yep, nope, we are sure. Come on in.
Laura was given a dose of methotrexate, a drug used to terminate pregnancies, in this case to absorb the non-viable sac. Blood tests showed Laura was still pregnant after the first round of methotrexate. 3 weeks later, they gave her another dose. Again, tests showed Laura was still pregnant, so they ordered another ultrasound.
As soon as I was up and on screen, what I saw was exactly what I'd seen with my daughter 100 times, and his little heartbeat. And the only thing I can remember thinking was, oh my gosh, we have been trying to save me from, this horrible, scenario and save my life. And in reality, we were attacking him. She immediately apologized. I'm so sorry. And then she proceeded to tell me what she expected from a baby that was exposed at such high levels, which would be missing limbs, abnormalities with his heart, his brain.
She found a new doctor and spent the rest of the pregnancy wondering how much damage her unborn baby boy suffered from the misdiagnosis.
I remember the first time I felt him kick, and I felt so bad because I didn't know if he was in pain or what I had done to him.
G was born at 36 weeks with doctors at Mary Bridge Children's Hospital in Tacoma ready to care for him. He spent 2 weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit.
We went through tests and procedures, and he got his first feeding tube at around 2 months old. We couldn't get him to gain weight. We couldn't get him to eat what he needed to eat.
Doctors discovered his intestines were turned around. He has soft spots in his skull, abnormalities with his spine, ribs, fingers, and toes.
He is nonverbal. He is 100% reliant on his G-tube for feeding. He is developmentally delayed. He has had 7 surgeries. He does love his cape.
His cape lists some of what he's been through. G can say 2 words, mom and no. He's learning sign language.
My name is...
He's happy and playful and the best little brother for his sister, Casey.
We can't stop him. You can't hold him down.
This little boy is living proof that doctors can be wrong, and the mistake nearly cost him his life. The drugs they gave his mother left him with lifelong challenges, but he survived. How many other children never get that chance? We'll never know, and this amendment would do nothing to prevent these tragic errors. By leaving the door wide open for anomalies, it invites more of the same deadly mistakes. Now, let's return to the language in Section 2. Medical emergency. That sounds narrow, but the definition is broad and vague. Courts and abortion-friendly doctors can stretch it to mean almost anything, even emotional distress. It's a loophole wide open for abuse. So while supporters say this section saves 95% of babies, the reality is it creates wide open doors for abortion. And more importantly, it forces us to say we are okay with denying protection to children conceived in rape, incest, anomaly, or so-called emergencies. God doesn't call us to draw those lines. Every child is made in His image, and every child's life is equally valuable. Writing these exceptions into the Constitution is not a step toward justice. It is entrenching injustice in the very document meant to protect our rights. Section 3 of HJR 73 says this: the General Assembly may enact laws that regulate the provision of abortions, abortion facilities, and abortion providers to ensure the health and safety of the pregnant mother. These laws shall include, but not be limited to, laws requiring physicians providing abortion care to have admitting privileges at a nearby hospital, laws requiring facilities where abortions are performed or induced to be licensed and inspected for clean and safe conditions and adequate instruments to treat any emergencies arising from an abortion procedure, laws requiring physicians to perform a sufficient examination of the woman to determine the unborn child's gestational age and any pre-existing medical conditions that may influence the procedure, and laws requiring ultrasounds to be performed only by physicians or licensed medical technicians. That might sound like good oversight, but notice the key word, may. The legislature is not required to pass these regulations. It only has permission to. Nothing here enforces itself. And notice the focus. Every regulation listed here is about the safety of the mother, not the life of the child. This section treats abortion as a legitimate medical procedure that should be regulated like any other, instead of calling it what it is, the intentional killing of an unborn child. Even worse, this section leaves wide open the biggest issue facing Missouri today: abortion pills ordered online. This is quickly becoming the preferred way to kill the unborn, and nothing in this amendment gives the legislature authority to stop it. In fact, with pills being mailed in from out of state or even overseas, Missouri lawmakers would have almost no way to enforce restrictions. The reality is, this amendment locks us into a framework where the unborn are left completely unprotected, while abortion by mail continues unchecked. And here's another problem. This entire section depends on the legislature, but this is the same legislature whose failure to act allowed Amendment 3 of 2024 to pass in the first place. We were promised real IP reform for over a decade, and it never came. Even during this past session, when this very amendment was being crafted, they stripped out a requirement that rape and incest claims be reported to police. Why? Because they said it couldn't pass with that safeguard included. Even with a Republican supermajority. If they didn't have the courage to fight for those protections then, why should we trust them to carry out this section faithfully now? And remember, political control doesn't last forever. If Democrats take the majority in a few years, this section gives them the same authority to regulate abortion however they see fit, which could mean loosening restrictions or expanding access even further. So Section 3 doesn't protect children. It simply regulates abortion as health care for mothers, leaving unborn lives unprotected, while giving us a false sense of security that something meaningful has been done. Section 4 of HJR 73 says this: no abortion shall be performed or induced upon a woman based on a prenatal diagnosis, test, or screening indicating a disability in an unborn child, except in cases of a fetal anomaly. This sounds like it protects children with disabilities, but notice the exception: except in cases of a fetal anomaly. That one phrase swallows the whole protection. A doctor can simply label a condition as an anomaly and the abortion is allowed. And what counts as an anomaly? In Section 12, the amendment defines it as something that makes life outside the womb impossible. But in practice, diagnoses are often wrong. Families are told their child will never survive, and yet many of those children are born healthy and thriving. We already know how this works in real life. Children diagnosed with Down syndrome, spina bifida, or other conditions are frequently targeted for abortion. Studies show the vast majority of babies given these diagnoses are aborted, in some cases as high as 90%. So what this section really does is pretend to protect disabled children while giving doctors full discretion to end their lives if they call it an anomaly. And because this is in the Constitution, those children are permanently denied equal protection under the law. Once again, instead of defending life, this amendment writes partiality into our highest law. Some children are protected, others are not. But God doesn't make that distinction. Every child is fearfully and wonderfully made, regardless of ability. Section 4 may look compassionate, but in reality, it legalizes discrimination against the most vulnerable. Section 5 of HJR 73 says this: no public funds shall be expended for the purpose of performing, inducing, or otherwise assisting any abortion except in cases of medical emergency, rape, or incest as otherwise authorized by law. At first, this might sound like a safeguard, but let's compare it to what Missouri law already says. Currently, taxpayer funding for abortion is extremely limited, basically only when the mother's life is at risk. But under HJR 73, that restriction is weakened. For the first time, Missouri's Constitution would allow taxpayer dollars to fund abortions in cases of rape, incest, or so-called medical emergencies. And the phrase, as otherwise authorized by law, is a massive loophole. If a future legislature or court expands the definition of exceptions, taxpayer money could be used for many more abortions. That means your tax dollars and mine, money from every Missourian, would be used to pay for ending the lives of unborn children. Even people of faith who believe abortion is wrong would be forced to participate in funding it. So Section 5 doesn't strengthen pro-life protections. It does the opposite. It expands abortion funding in Missouri beyond where it is today, and it builds that expansion directly into our Constitution. God calls rulers to defend the innocent, not to make the people complicit in their destruction. Section 5 puts the blood of these children not only on abortion providers, but on every taxpayer in Missouri. Section 6 of HJR 73 says this: except in cases of a medical emergency in which consent cannot be obtained, no abortion shall be performed or induced upon a woman without her voluntary and informed consent, given freely and without coercion. In the case of a minor under the age of 18 years who is not emancipated, no person shall knowingly perform or induce an abortion, except in cases of a medical emergency in which consent cannot be obtained, unless the attending physician has obtained 1. the written consent of the minor and a parent or legal guardian, and 2. documentation of the consent is retained in the minor's medical record. Licensed medical physicians shall be required to provide women with medically accurate information. The General Assembly may enact laws to provide for the right of a minor to consent to an abortion as granted by a court order. On the surface, this seems like common sense. It requires informed consent, parental consent for minors, and medically accurate information. But here's what it really does. First, it normalizes abortion as healthcare. Instead of outlawing it, this section treats abortion like any other medical service that just needs proper consent. That's the wrong foundation. Abortion isn't healthcare. It's the killing of a child. Second, look at the phrase medically accurate information. Who defines that? In practice, it could be the abortion industry or government bureaucrats, not pro-life doctors. What they call accurate might mean downplaying the risks of abortion while ignoring its impact on the unborn. Section 7 of HJR 73 says this: fetal organ harvesting after an abortion is not permitted under any circumstances. But the reality is fetal organ harvesting is already banned under both Missouri and federal law. Missouri Statute Section 188.036 makes it a crime to use fetal tissue or organs from an abortion for experimentation or research. Federal law, 42 U.S. Code Section 289G-2, makes it a felony to buy or sell fetal tissue, punishable by up to 10 years in prison and a $500,000 fine. So this section adds nothing new. It's what we call ballot candy. Language that sounds tough but is already the law. It's included here to make the amendment look pro-life, while the real substance of the amendment, the abortion exceptions, gets overlooked. And think about the contradiction. This amendment says you can abort a child for rape, incest, anomaly, or emergency, but you can't use the tissue afterward. That doesn't protect the child's life. It just regulates what happens after their death. So Section 7 is a distraction. It doesn't save a single baby. It's here to make voters feel better about an amendment that still enshrines abortion into our Constitution. Section 8 of HJR 73 says this: a woman's ability to access health care in cases of miscarriages, ectopic pregnancies, and other medical emergencies shall not be infringed by the state. Missouri law already allows treatment for miscarriages, ectopic pregnancies, and genuine emergencies. Women are not being denied this care. So why put this language here? Because during the campaign for Amendment 3 in 2024, pro-choice groups spread the lie that pro-life laws stop women from getting miscarriage and ectopic care. That fear tactic helped them win. Now, legislators want to bake that false narrative into our Constitution. And notice the phrase other medical emergencies. That's broad and undefined. Courts and abortion-friendly doctors could interpret it to mean almost anything, including mental health or emotional distress. Under that loophole, abortion could be justified on nearly any grounds just by calling it an emergency. So, Section 8 isn't really about protecting women. That protection already exists. What it does is take a talking point from Amendment 3's campaign and write it into the Constitution. In many ways, it feels like an overcorrection, an attempt to reassure voters against a fear that was never true in the first place. And the danger is, by adding the vague phrase other medical emergencies, it actually creates a wide-open loophole that could be stretched to allow abortion on demand. What looks like reassurance may end up being an open door. Section 9 of HJR 73 says this: no gender transition surgeries shall be knowingly performed on children under 18 years of age, and no cross-sex hormones or puberty-blocking drugs shall be knowingly prescribed or administered for the purpose of gender transition to children under 18 years of age. Of course, we all want to protect children from harmful gender transition procedures. But here's the reality. Missouri already passed the SAFE Act in 2023, which bans these procedures for minors, and that law is still in effect for at least the next 2 years. That means we already have protections in place, and we have time to address this issue in a firm and legally solid way. It doesn't need to be bundled together with abortion in our Constitution. So Section 9 isn't about adding new protections. It's about mixing two different issues together in one amendment. And when issues this serious are addressed, they should be done clearly, directly, and on their own. Section 10 of HJR 73 says this: any action challenging the validity of any state law relating to reproductive health care shall be brought in the Circuit Court of Cole County, Missouri. If a pleading, written motion, or other paper drawing into question the constitutionality of a state statute does not include the state, one of its agencies, or one of its officers or employees in an official capacity, the party bringing the action shall file a notice of constitutional question and serve it on the Attorney General, and the Attorney General shall have the right to intervene in the litigation. This is more than just procedural details. It has some big consequences. First, it means every lawsuit about abortion in Missouri would go to one place, Cole County. That means one judge, or just a handful of judges, could end up controlling every abortion case in the state. If that judge happens to lean pro-abortion, every law our legislature passes could be struck down before it even gets off the ground. Second, this section gives the Attorney General the right to intervene in every abortion-related case. That sounds good when we have a pro-life AG. But what happens if Missouri elects a pro-abortion Attorney General in the future? This language gives them special authority to step into every case and argue for abortion access instead of for life. So Section 10 concentrates a lot of power in one place, and that creates risks that could backfire badly in the future. Section 11 says this: the General Assembly shall have the authority to enact laws to carry out the provisions of this section. That might sound reassuring, but look closely. The legislature's power here is not unlimited. It only extends to what this amendment already allows. In other words, lawmakers can write rules to manage abortion, but they cannot go beyond the exceptions this amendment puts into our Constitution. And what does that mean in practice? It means the General Assembly can regulate abortion facilities, inspections, or paperwork, but it cannot ban abortions or close the wide loopholes. The text of this amendment makes clear their authority is about protecting the mother's health and safety, not the life of the child. There's another concern, too. This section doesn't require the legislature to act. It only says they may. If lawmakers choose to do nothing, nothing changes. And if control of the legislature shifts in the future, the very same authority could be used to loosen restrictions and expand abortion access. And we've already seen how unwilling many lawmakers are to hold the line. When this amendment was being drafted, they had language that would have required a police report for rape or incest claims. But they dropped it, not because it was wrong, but because they didn't think it would pass, even with a Republican supermajority. So Section 11 doesn't strengthen pro-life protections. It simply hands lawmakers permission to regulate abortion within this weak framework, while unborn children are still left without equal protection. Section 12 of HJR 73 gives definitions for some of the key terms used in the amendment. Most of them are straightforward, but 3 stand out, and they create serious problems. First, fetal anomaly. It's defined as a condition that makes life outside the womb impossible. But in practice, these diagnoses are often wrong. Many parents have been told their baby wouldn't survive, only to later deliver a healthy child. And here's the real problem. Once the baby is aborted, there's no way to know if the diagnosis was even correct. There are no checks, no accountability, no safeguards. By writing this into the Constitution, the amendment gives doctors broad discretion to label babies as anomalies and deny them protection. Second, medical emergency. It's defined as a situation that risks death or irreversible physical impairment for the mother. That sounds narrow, but it's vague enough to be stretched. Courts and abortion-friendly doctors could interpret it to include things like mental health or emotional distress, creating another wide-open loophole. And notice what's missing. Just because there's an emergency doesn't mean the baby can't be saved. In real medical practice, doctors often act to preserve both mother and child. Fetal monitoring can detect distress, so doctors can intervene. In some emergencies, like hemorrhage, preeclampsia, or uterine rupture, skilled treatment sometimes succeeds in stabilizing the mother and delivering the baby alive. Even extremely premature infants, born before 23 weeks, now have documented survivals with advances in intensive neonatal care. Yet this amendment never mentions trying to protect the baby's life when possible. It only speaks of the mother. That silence is dangerous. Third, reasonable medical judgment. This means whatever a reasonably prudent physician decides. In reality, it leaves the door wide open for abortion-friendly doctors to justify almost any abortion as reasonable. So while Section 12 looks technical, it actually controls how the rest of the amendment plays out. And in each case, the definitions give doctors and courts the discretion to expand abortion access far beyond what voters may think they're approving, while leaving the unborn unprotected even in emergencies where they could be saved. Section 13 of HJR 73 says this: all provisions of this section are severable. If any provision of this section is found by a court of competent jurisdiction to be unconstitutional or unconstitutionally enacted, the remaining provisions of this section shall be and remain valid. This is called a severability clause. It means that if a court strikes down one part of the amendment, the rest of it would remain in effect. In other words, the different sections don't all stand or fall together. If a judge were to throw out one part, everything else would still continue as law. We've been highly critical of HJR 73 in this video, and we don't apologize for that. Anytime we are proposing changes to our Constitution, we should take a very careful look at what the language actually says. This isn't something to rush through or accept blindly. What we've seen is that the supporters of this amendment talk a lot about what they hope it will do. But when you look at their materials, there isn't much explanation of how the text itself delivers those promises. They admit the exceptions aren't good, but they say this amendment is just the first step. And besides, it's the only option we have right now. But as we've walked through the provisions, we've raised serious doubts. There's no guarantee this amendment will deliver the results we've been promised today, and very little reason to believe it will give us stronger protections in the future. And if you look at the numbers, Missouri already shows us a hard truth. While abortions performed inside our state have drastically slowed since the heartbeat bill, the overall number of Missouri women seeking abortions hasn't declined much. It's just shifted across state lines. We'll unpack that more in the next episode. But it's important to recognize that weak or compromised language won't solve this problem. That's why this matters. If we put weak or compromised language into our Constitution, it will be much harder to undo later. In our next video, we'll lay out what we believe is a better path, one that aims for the complete end of abortion in our state, and the obstacles that stand in the way of achieving it. We hope you'll join us for that conversation, and we pray you'll continue seeking God's wisdom as you think through these critical choices for Missouri's future.